What was the please stop school presentation that you witnessed? This was in fucking college. Our bio finals were to present on any topic that was related to biology. A group was presenting on types of protection for sex. Not once did they refer to any body parts or fluids by their scientific names. So yes, they literally said dick, cunt, and pussy on the slides and read off them. Everyone kept glancing over at our professor, who had this look like he was just constantly cleaning his glasses because he couldn't believe what he was witnessing. They got Kentucky fucked on grading. I googled Kentucky fucked, but it just delivered porn results. In autocorrect from completely, perhaps. I hope they leave it. It Kentucky fucking works. Not a presentation, but during our school assemblies, we often had student performers, which were usually musically inclined individuals or theater kids doing a scene/monologue. One kid decided to do a stand-up comedy routine about a girl giving him a blowjob. So awkward, and the principal had to interrupt him. For some reason, the pure cringe from this hit me like a truck. I can only imagine what being in the audience would be like. A friend of mine did a stand-up routine for a talent show. I laughed for him because no one else was. His younger brother came up to me afterwards and thanked me for laughing because he didn't want to be the one to fake it. Oh man, that's so sad. That's so sad. Oh man, I went to a private Christian school for 9th and 10th grade. We used to have weekly chapels, which were like normal school assemblies, except they all started with a prayer and a few gospel songs. One day, we were told we were going to have a special chapel with a special guest speaker. Usually this meant a pastor was going to come in and give us a sermon instead of normal assembly shit. But we were surprised to see that a well-known and well-liked kid from that year's senior class was going to be the speaker. The principal introduced him, we all clapped, and he started speaking. I didn't know it, but one of the most glorious moments of my youth was about to play out. Hey guys, I'm really proud to have been chosen to speak to you guys about something that affects me personally, and affects many of you, but most people aren't comfortable talking about. My mind. What's it gonna be? Rape? Drugs? Mental health? I'll go about this by laying out my own experience with this issue. I'll tell you how it can affect you, and then you guys can split up into discussion groups, and the teachers will pass out material for you guys to discuss. Discussion groups post-chapel were pretty standard. My mind. Fuck, I hate those discussion groups. Hopefully this will be an interesting and easy topic to talk about. I'm sure it will be, seeing as this is one of the most popular kids in school, and they never ever let students make speeches in chapel. The truth is, although you guys only see the best of me here, I've been struggling with something deep down inside for a long time. Something that brought me shame for a long time, but I've finally mustered up the strength to open up about. For the past few years, I've been addicted. My mind. This kid, an addiction? No way, he's such a goody-goody. I've been addicted to porn and masturbation. Nothing will ever compare to the shock of 15-year-old me hearing that. Like, that was so far removed from anything I thought he was going to say that it took me a solid 10 seconds to realize what that boy actually just said in front of his entire Christian school. And he proceeded to give a whole 20-minute speech about his struggle to stop jerking it and how it made him feel ashamed in the eyes of the Lord. I can't stress enough this wasn't a prank. This kid was dead serious, nearly brought to tears by his own speech. This was a fully planned out event, sanctioned by the school. They knew what it was going to be about. They had discussion questions ready. I would kill to be a fly on the wall while that kid and the headmaster had the conversation that inspired that chapel session. Holding back the laughter during his speech was the second hardest thing I've ever done in my life. You'd get suspended for laughing during chapel. The first was trying to keep it together in discussion groups we got split into. At least they had the sense to keep boys and girls separate for the discussion, but the fact remains that we genuinely convinced the old biology teacher who was assigned to our group that we, a group of 14 to 16-year-old boys, were unironically going to quit masturbating with the help of Jesus' blood. I masturbated like an hour later in the boys' bathroom. Someone in my class did a book report on the dictionary. The teacher was pissed. All of us students thought it was hilarious. Never heard the end of the presentation. Damn, I wish I had thought of that. I hated book reports. In college, someone was doing a presentation on Nelson Mandela and kept referring to Africans as African Americans. My mom had a black friend from the UK who was also Muslim. She came out to the US for business and people were shook by this black lady in a hijab with a British accent. Someone called her an African American and she said, "I really hope I don't sound American." Had a boyfriend who immigrated from South Africa with his family as a teenager. One of his parents was from South Africa, one was American. He was African American, but also white. It was a long slog through high school with that one. Man, a white African American. That dude must be a pimp. It was my sophomore year English class. This kid who was reading his essay in front of the class and started to stumble over some of the words. The teacher recognized the words and found the essay the kid plagiarized and started helping him read it. The kid didn't understand what was happening and just thanked the teacher and kept reading. Imagine the kid realized and said, "F*** it," and kept reading. That's how I'm imagining it. I watched a kid in his last year of high school start his presentation with, "I might f*** up while presenting this because I plagiarized the whole thing last night and barely practiced." The professor didn't hear what the student said, but just acted like they did and gave a smile and a thumbs up, signaling that the student could begin presenting. The whole class heard it, but everyone was just too shocked and curious to see if he would actually be able to pull it off. I'm pretty sure he did. Ballsy move, Jason. Ballsy move. Man, Jason's a pro. I wonder where Jason is now. I studied and went to school for computer security. In an introduction to computer security course, we had to do a project on social engineering. A student decided that for his project, he was going to find a way to gain access to a chosen website. He found a small local business website, identified that the domain was registered to an email address from a local ISP, called the ISP to reset the password. They asked him for his last 4 digits of his social security number, so he hung up. He found the phone number of the business, so called them and pretended to be from the ISP, offering 3 months free if the person did a 5-question survey. They accepted and answered some BS questions, and then he asked for the last 4 of the guy's social security number, which they gave no problem. He then called the ISP with the last 4, got them to reset the password of the email account. He then logged into the email and used it to get the domain registrar to send a password reset to the email, which he used to reset the password of the domain account, and deleted the email. He recorded all phone calls and screenshotted the whole process. As he presented all these, we kept expecting him to say, "But that would be illegal, so I didn't do X," but he went all the way. The professor finally stopped him after he said he logged into the domain registrar and told him to destroy everything and never speak of it again. I think the professor was a bit nicer than he could have been, potentially to the point of accomplice, telling him to destroy evidence. Wow, nothing like committing digital crimes to pass a class. Man, this guy went hard, and he's probably in jail right now. In Speech 101 in college, we had to pick a children's book and voice act each character. That was it. That was the entire assignment. Well, one student decided to take it to the next level. He chose a Berenstain Bear book and decided to not only do voice acting for every single one of the characters, but also act it out. It was physically uncomfortable to watch this guy scramble around the room and pretend to be bears and other animals. It was not well done. It was awful. That sounds hilarious. Psychology class. Our final was to research and do a presentation on a mental illness. One group chose necrophilia, started with the first slide saying, "Let's crack open a cold one." And that was also the last slide. It's me, I did this. I cringe about it to this day, nearly 20 years later. I was 16 and in high school. My high school was going to do a spring talent show. I wanted to be in the talent show and sing off my talents. The problem was, my actual talents are not ones that I could show off at a talent show, so I decided to try singing. I've never sung in my life, I've never had voice lessons. I was in my prime weeb stage and chose an anime song to sing. I didn't know any actual Japanese, I just memorized the lyrics from hearing the song so many times. Luckily, I didn't make it past auditions, but several people saw an overweight girl in a Sailor Moon shirt trying to sing Butterfly despite having never done any singing or voice training ever in her life. Nearly 20 years later, and remembering it keeps me awake at night. What are your actual talents? Surviving lethal doses of public embarrassment. Man, that talent would actually get you far though. When I was in high school, a girl from an absurdly wealthy family gave a presentation on why the rich are just as oppressed as anyone. This was in a normal public school in Kentucky where about 90% of the students were middle class at best. You could feel the eyes rolling in that room. Man, that's privilege if I've ever heard it. We were supposed to have Arnold Schwarzenegger come to our school sometime around 99 or 2000. Principal was hyping it up for weeks. Then about 4 days before his arrival, it was announced on Friday that he wasn't coming. Fast forward to Monday, during morning announcements, it's announced he's changed his mind and is coming to our school tomorrow as planned. Come Tuesday morning, everyone is excited. We're all amped to meet the Terminator. A handful of parents even came with VHS copies of his movies, posters, etc. We're all going to our gym/auditorium, taking our seats. Principal takes the stage and takes a moment to make some announcements, award honor roll, perfect attendance, etc. Finally, she starts hyping up Arnold Schwarzenegger. Everyone is excited and on edge when she basically says, "Here's Arnie," and it's the vice principal in a leather jacket holding a shotgun, not a toy one either, and spends 30 to 40 minutes trying to hype us up for FCAT, all the while doing the absolute worst impression of Arnold Schwarzenegger I've ever heard. Once we realized Arnold wasn't there, people started shouting, screaming at the principals for lying to us, along with some of the parents who came to this. I do hope someone has footage of this meltdown and a bunch of K-5 kids shouting and screaming at the principals because Arnold Schwarzenegger didn't come to our school, because I clearly remember 2 to 3 people having camcorders. Edit. As for some of the questions, Arnold was scheduled but cancelled last minute on not only my school, but my cousin's who he was supposed to go to on Wednesday. Instead, he only went to one school in my city, which I don't remember which one at the moment, but I'll add it if I remember it. Yes, the principal apologized the next day and the vice principal changed schools the following school year. I have absolutely no idea why he thought bringing a shotgun was a good idea, but I think he was attempting to look the part, which, considering his massive gut, really didn't help. Man, I really hope Arnold Schwarzenegger reads this. My sophomore year, we had to make a presentation about any person that made an impact on the world that was inspirational. Someone chose Hitler. I mean, he did make an impact on the world. Not necessarily a good impact, but still, a very, very bad impact. Like Ollivander said, Hitler did great things. Terrible, yes, but great. Oh man, why would you ever do that? Not at school, but when I was in high school, my church youth group went to this church camp. For those uninitiated, Thursday nights are normally the really emotional nights. Well, this camp was different. Thursday was the night the guy that started the camp comes on stage and begins giving a bunch of middle school and high school boys and girls the sex talk. All I remember from that night was the quote, "Just because there's a hole there doesn't mean you have to stick something in it. But then the boat will sink." The metaphor doesn't really apply to boats. Environmental science. Dude decides to do his project on global cooling. Buddy was up there for 7 minutes explaining to the class how the Earth has been getting colder and colder and how it's eventually going to cause problems to other species. Teacher was really passionate about this class and you could see her squirming in her seat the whole way through the presentation. Whole thing was a big WTF. His sources were online forums. If you ever do a project and your source is an online forum, maybe just change the topic. 2 come to mind. Rural public school in Kansas. 1, speaker comes to talk to us before prom. Very clear that it's an abstinence-only speaker. Talked about our diamond zones, the crotch area for men, the whole torso from crotch to neck for women, and how we shouldn't let people touch us in our diamond zones because that's where our secret treasure is. 2, wickedly smart student in my physics class was giving a presentation on event horizons. Was actually really interesting, definitely knew his stuff. Then, in the last third of the presentation, he starts talking about how the time dilations around event horizons can actually explain why fossils are carbon dated wrong, and that it can help us prove that the dates in the Bible actually line up with science. It was actually somewhat entertaining to see just how quickly he went off the rails. For a public speaking class in college, we had to give a persuasive speech. One kid did his speech about porn. If he had had a legitimate argument, like sex work is real work, or porn has a negative effect on a person's self-image, the speech would have been fine. We were all mature adults. But all he did was list the different kinds of porn he liked, in detail, with visual aids. The professor stopped him after a few minutes and asked him to explain what he wanted to persuade the audience about. He answered, "Porn is good." Alright, that's it for today, guys. Did you enjoy the video? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, this is Max, signing off.